like, I mean, just playing too, and getting back to the
Yeah.
piano stuff, right? I mean, you're learning standards, and you're
Yeah.
starting to play gigs and things
Yeah.
like that. And I'm sure that you weren't, like blowing people away right at
No.
first when you're sitting in and playing. But if you don't take that chance,
Yeah.
I mean, what do they always say? They say, you make 1,000 failures and one success,
Yeah.
and that success is worth 1,000 failures. So it's the same thing with music. I mean,
Yeah.
you're playing gigs and you're learning all that stuff. With you, jumping back to the piano and stuff, you're sitting in, playing gigs and all that. You ended up going to DePaul. Was that for composition or was that for jazz?
No, I wanted to play, and
Okay.
And it was my mom actually who had found out that Larry Novak was teaching there, and she knew about him, and I started to learn about him, and I wanted to study with him. Like, it was I had blinders on. I just
Right.
wanted to practice the piano at the time. Composition was just something that I did for fun. I didn't even think of it of studying it formally at the time. I wanted to focus.
You probably
on the
didn't
piano.
even know you could necessarily. Right?
Well,
I mean,
I had
more-
started. I had in high school. I was writing little pieces.
Okay.
but
But did you know you could like study it for like compositional
Yeah, I don't
degree or
think
something?
so. I don't think I was thinking that way.
Yeah.
Like, I was so like, it was all about like guys like Chick Corea and Herbie
Yeah,
Hancock
playing.
and Oscar Peterson. Like, that was and McCoy and Ahmad Jamal. Like, that was like the greatest, and it still is. I mean, it's like I'm still in awe of it, which is wonderful. That's another key component of this. Like, is to be in awe of it. Like, I was just so in awe of that, and I wanted to just be spending my time working on it. And I thought that was the greatest thing you can do, is
Yeah.
to be like, some of these concerts where I would see McCoy or Ahmad or Chick improvising. I thought that was the most incredible thing that you can do with your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I started. I went to DePaul for a little while. I mean, I went to DePaul, and I hooked up with Larry immediately. And I wasn't, when I first got there, I wasn't sure I wanted to be in Chicago, and I actually ended up looking at a couple other schools. But I came back because I was like, I really got a lot from Larry Novak.
Yeah.
At the school, and so that became my focus for 4 years, and I got a lot
good-
out from being
good guy to
there.
study
Yeah,
with.
I got so much from him, both technically at the piano and theoretically and musically from him, and he was just a great guy, and so that was
Yeah.
the focus of my.
So you finished your degree there? Was it
Yeah.
in jazz?
Yeah.
Performance or?
Yeah, it was a jazz performance degree.
Okay. So you finished that, and then when did you start to? You're playing gigs and doing all that. When did you start to get into the composition? Like, you started writing for your own group, probably.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
That's-
I was always writing. I was working in a group in college. It was called Byron Febs, I remember, and it was the band was serious about getting together and writing original music, and I was writing a lot for it, and it actually got a couple record deals, like
Wow.
local,
Yeah.
record label at the time, and there were some great people that were involved with this label at the time, and the music got some, was getting written up in Downbeat. It was getting good
Oh,
reviews,
man. Yeah.
and so I was writing, and I was into these groups that were, in addition to like the straight ahead jazz stuff that I was into, like Oscar Peterson and Wynton Kelly. I was into the guys like Chick Corea that were composers, and McCoy and Herbie that were composers, and so that group and then others at the time became a vehicle for me just to write music, and this came from studying with Larry. He would always be challenging me with different harmonic approaches to standards and just different ways to play changes.
Yeah.
And I would take these things he was giving me, and I would create compositions so that he showed me a chord, how to play on a certain thing, and be like, approach when you see a dominant chord, do this. I'd be like, okay, and I would work on it with some standards, but then part of my learning was I would write a tune that had that chord. And then I became a composer, and it was working well, and I was
Yeah.
into it. And then another guy that I was studying with at DePaul, my last year at DePaul, was Cliff Colna, who is a great arranger and conductor. And I really learned a lot about arranging and how to present my music, and how to so that I can write and then put groups together, and go in the studio and record. I learned
Right.
a lot from him. And so all that was happening at the time from playing with different groups. And so I just was writing for different projects, and I wasn't even.
It just organically happened.
Yeah,
basically.
it was just pure joy for me. I would literally I would be practicing the piano, several hours a day, and then I'd be writing music all night.
Yeah.
And then that was my life, and then I was a composer, and then I had music, and it was with bands that I was working with, or if I wanted, it was my own music, I would then have to figure out how to get musicians to come together and play it. I didn't have aspirations to be a band leader.
Right.
I just composed music and needed musicians to come play. And then I was problem solving, like how to...
You're a band leader at that point.
I didn't realize I became one. Yeah.
Now, how did you hook up, connect with Ramsey? Because was that like your first big thing that happened as far as composing, arranging happened?
Yeah, that was...
That was like 2000, 2001?
That was before that. It was 1997, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a long time ago.
It's not that long ago.
I was working, I started working with Orbert Davis, like around 1994, 95. I was just out of school, and I was also playing with this great bassist named James Kamak, who I still play with. He still plays with Ahmad Jamal, and he connected me with Orbert. And I was playing with Orbert for a couple of years.
Like in his quintet. This is before the Chicago Jazz Philharmonic and all of that.
Before
this
that.
is like the small group.
He was with the quintet, and he also was writing for a string quartet with it too. He did a video. The first thing I did with him was a video he put out with strings and like jazz quartet.
Okay.
And we played a showcase at the Jazz Showcase, and Tommy LaPuma, who was the head of Impulse, and Ramsey Lewis came. And Ramsey was, I think, involved with Impulse Records at the time as well. And we played one of my tunes. It was with Orbert's group. And then Ramsey liked my writing. And then I got a call from one of his producers, Fran Allen Leak.
Okay.
Had also had known me and told Ramsey about my writing. And he had just seen me. And she called me up and she said, Ramsey's looking for some music for his new record. Go check it out. Go talk to him.
Yeah.
And I did. And I met him at his studios, and he's like, I'm looking for a solo piano piece that has this flamenco kind of sound, and I want this kind of features in the. I want to be able to I want to be play with this kind of technique in this piece.
Oh, so he really
he was describing
what he
this
was
to me.
looking
He's
for.
like, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. Also in that meeting, he's like, I had made the first record I had ever made on my own was in 1996 called Real World, and Ramsey, I think my Fran had given Ramsey the record, and so he had heard it, and he liked two pieces on that record, and he said, all right, I'm going to use these two pieces on my next album, and that's when he described. And by the way, I'm also looking for this piece that's almost classical-ish, but it's got flamenco, this and that. And he's like, he's just sort of telling me this, kind of like, I just want to let you know, like, if you can think you can do something. He's like almost challenging me.
Yeah, right.
And I love that. And so it was a Monday, I remember. And then I went home and I wrote this thing in a few days. And then I wrote it all out. I came back on Friday, this like 8-page chart, like everything written out. It was like, and like one of the things that I incorporated in that piece, I was playing the Un Suspiro Etude by Franz Liszt at the time, which has this like left hand, arpeggio left hand, which worked well for this sort of flamenco-ish kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I had just been playing that, and I put this in, I wrote it all out, and Ramsey's looking at this. I wrote it all out. He's looking at that, and he's like, and it's a lot to try to sight read.
Yeah.
He's looking at it, he's like, man, like as if I was like trying to challenge him or something, which I wasn't. I was just like,
Right.
I was just eager, and so he loved it. And then he said to me, and by the way, he's like, I'm also looking for a tango kind of thing. And I was kind of like this, that. Like a few days later, I came back with a tango, and he loved it. And then that was it. That was the start of our relationship.
Yeah.
And then he put out his record it came out in 98, I think, called Dance of the Soul, which was my piece. That was from my other record. And then I worked for him for about 6 years.
Wow.
Did writing for 4 different records. And then I wrote the theme song for his nationally syndicated TV show.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd have different artists come play it at the beginning and the end. So
you wrote that?
So I wrote that.
Oh, wow.
And Chick played on it, like these different people, George Duke, like it was really cool, and it was a great experience for me. And
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that puts you on the map.
Yeah,
right?
it did,
basically.
because people would say, "Oh, you Ramsey," was very well known all over the world, and and that helped me when I was putting out my own music. Like, oh, you know. So,
How did you connect? I mean, it was a little bit farther down the road from that, but then you also hooked up with the U.S. Embassy or the State Department. Was that
yeah,
mid 2000s?
that was around 2007, 2008.
But that's also because I mean you're with Ramsey, you're writing original music, and then you're writing original music with your own group, and
Yeah.
your groups are starting to get a name for yourself out, just not composing, but also playing wise. And I remember you were touring, and you were starting to get out of the city a lot, and people were getting to know you. And isn't that kind of how this whole other thing happened, right? With the well, you talk about
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
you know exactly.
I at the time I was playing a bunch with this core quartet, which was Jeff Bradfield on sax, who I had known from my DePaul days. We've been great friends, and he's
There's another great composer too.
Yeah,
right?
he's a great composer, and we've just always been tight and playing, all the time. And Lauren Cohan, bassist, who is now living in New York, who's my cousin.
Oh, he's your cousin?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's just,
okay.
we have actually spell our last names differently, and it's a coincidence we have the same last name, but he's my cousin.
Oh,
and
wow.
we grew up playing together. He's a tremendous bass player. And then Kobe Watkins at the time was a great drummer. And these guys, we were playing all the time. Like, either we were playing gigs or I was writing music and we were rehearsing at my place like once or twice a week. And it was a great time. These were great musicians, and it was a great group vibe.
Yeah.
And so, I had put out a record in 2001 called Here and Now. That also really helped me. It was on this UK label called Scirocco Jazz. And so after that record came out, I was had the opportunity to tour a bit with it and play a bunch of gigs and get this group playing together all the time. And it was like we were playing complex arrangements, that we just all knew. And it was a great time for that group. And then the opportunity came out to audition for that Lincoln Center thing.
Right.
And the group was already and also I had a record that had just come out. It was just coming out on Motima at that time. And so, we were playing all the time. So we were able to just walk into Jazz and Lincoln Center and audition, and we had the
You
music
just
together.
threw down because you
Yeah.
guys could play all this stuff because it was no big deal because you've been practicing it since you were writing it.
Yeah,
So,
so it was great. So we had a group that was together, and then we did the audition, and we got accepted into it, and we did the tour. We went to Africa and Middle East, the first one, and we had an amazing
So what was
time.
it? What was the premise of it? So let's set it up so everybody kind of knows. Why did Jazz at Lincoln Center send you there specifically? Wasn't it an ambassadorship or getting music out?
There's a Jazz Ambassadors program. It used to be called Jazz Ambassadors that had been going on for I don't know, since sometime in the early 2000s, and it would partner up with like a Jazz at Lincoln Center or the Kennedy Center, or someone that can help facilitate organizing, getting the groups to audition, and having judges to decide who
Quality
gets to go.
control,
Yeah, exactly.
all of that.
And then the other component were the State Department people that were collaborating with Jazz Lincoln Center or Kennedy Center. So it had been called Jazz Ambassadors, I think, before that, and then it was called the Rhythm Road when I did it. And Lauren Cohan had done a previous version of it with another group. And so he saw that these open auditions were coming, and he's like, let's do that. And at the time, even I was like, I think it'll be cool, but I've got this other stuff, I don't know,
Right.
and I'm glad we did it.
Yeah.
And so it was a program. The idea of the program is it's a Jazz Ambassador program. Actually, it has its history back to the 50s. Where they were trying, it was a cultural program trying to share American culture with parts of the world that are not familiar with American culture, jazz being a uniquely American music.
Did Dizzy do some of
Dizzy,
that? Yeah, okay.
Dave Brubeck.
Yep.
So it's got this rich history. It's a wonderful program, and it's a very effective program, I think, having done it. And so they select groups. I think there were maybe 8 groups or something that got selected for this, and they get sent to different countries all over the world. And they ask us where we wanted to go. You don't always get your first choice,
Right.
but we were lucky. I think Africa was our first choice. So or different countries in Africa. And then so we did that, and they also tacked on Amon Jordan on that same tour.
Wow.
I'm not sure, it wasn't on the way. I'm glad they did. It was a blast.
Yeah.
So it was an amazing experience. It was a different. What was really wonderful, and we did it again. We got selected to do it the next year as well, and we went to all over Eastern Europe with it.
Wow.
And it was, and then I had gone and done separately that from groups from people we had met that were in State Department positions, managing positions, brought us separately from that program a couple times. We went back to Ukraine and did a tour again, and then we also went to Kosovo in 2012 and did a tour there. So, and it's a beautiful thing of the connections and understanding that happens quickly through music. And it was
And you would be there. You were there for what, like a month?
yeah, we were in Africa for about that whole tour was over, I think, just over a month. And then we were all over Eastern Europe for over a month, or about a month.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're long.
Yeah.
And so
but
you
I mean,
also,
you're really submerging yourself in the culture too,
yeah,
right?
And they're intense. They're not like, when people think of, I've been on tours that can be a little cushier or a lot cushier.
Play a gig and hang out for
Yeah,
2 days.
these would be playing. We were in some rough places and not easy to get to, and we were doing sometimes 3 events in a day, not sleeping, and then going to the next place, and you'd sleep at the end of the week, and they were grueling, but they were so rewarding. Like it was typical that when we'd end up in a new city or a new country, we would be just kind of wasted, tired, like. Because it would literally be, like no sleep and just this grueling schedule. And there's a lot of stress involved with traveling a lot of times in some of these places. We were in some airports in like Lubumbashi, Congo, and other places where like we weren't sure we were going to get out of there. That's a topic for another interview. But so you go and you land and you can be, it's grueling and you can be exhausted. Like, but then once you start getting out and playing and connecting with the people, you just, it's just like you're awake again and you're energized. And it was a very great experience for me on many levels. One of them was seeing the value of and the value of music in a different light, not just of performing my own music to an audience, to get people to get my music out there and to share it that way, but it was really the value of using music as a way of creating understanding. And the importance of music as something that can connect with other people, not about what I'm doing with my music, but just the power of music and to be able to be a part of that. It was really something special.
Yeah,
it really was.
Do you think you're going to have a chance to do that again? Is that something that you would want to do again, or is it?
I don't know. I mean, I'd love to. It's not like you're on the road in those conditions sometimes for a month. It can be very challenging.
Yeah.
And again, it was a period in time, like I'm very lucky with the time, like with Kobe and Lauren and Jeff, we were good friends and we knew how to weather. There would still be moments where it can be some tension, but we had each other's backs.
Yeah.
And it was, it was for touring in those types of conditions. It's challenging. So it's a special time.
If you're with some different people that maybe aren't as laid back in certain times and stuff, that could get pretty stressful, I'm sure, right?
And we'd hear about, because we would be working with people from the American embassies that were hosting us in these different countries, and they would tell us stories of other groups or things that had gone on, like people were at their wits' end or or just, it's that the whole dynamic of touring for a long period of time under any condition can be tricky for the group, and they're very combustible. They can be very combustible conditions, and so these people, these embassies would have stories of this or that group that were there, and these different musicians that were they were just sort of needing to vent, or they were totally at their wits' end, But
I think we both know some people that that.
Yeah.
So you got back from doing all that, and then you started composing your own stuff, and you've been building out your repertoire as far as that goes. I want to talk a little bit, since I want to be mindful of the time here, but you've got a long relationship with Joe Locke.
Yeah,
I think, and why don't we talk a little bit about Joe Locke, how you met Joe Locke, and now the new recording that's out now that you spent time on, because I think some of this is it's really fascinating how you ended up making this new recording happen with, is it Thomas Marriott?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about Joe Locke, because Joe Locke's, legendary vibraphonist, musician throughout the entire world.
Yeah. He's an amazing musician, amazing vibraphonist, and I first met him we were both on this record label called Scirocco Jazz that I mentioned that was in the UK. He had several records that were out on there. And the head of that label at the time, this was, like many years ago, 15 years ago, so had given him my record that was on the label, and he liked it, and he called me up. And this is the kind of guy he is. Like, these are like type of, like mentors in jazz, like that were, beautiful throughout the history of this music. Like, he just called me, had heard me. I didn't know him. He called me out of the blue and was like, man, I heard this record. I really, love it, and just want to let you know that. And it was an incredible
Who does that,
shot in the arm.
right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful cat like that. And then we stayed in touch, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to work with you. And we stayed in touch for, on and off over the years. And he got called to play with this orchestra in Lincoln, Nebraska, of all places. And he called me to
fly
do that
in,
gig.
do a one-off or something?
Yeah, it was with an orchestra,
Okay.
and it was actually, he's really close with this composer, Tim Garland, that I mentioned, who I'm a huge fan of, amazing composer. And Garland had written some of these orchestral arrangements, and I knew Garland's work, and amazing stuff to play and to listen to. It's amazing. So we played this concert, and it went really well, and the people in Lincoln, Nebraska really loved it. So what that ended up turning into a recording for Joe with that orchestra a few years later. And when that happened, that was at the time I was working on my Guggenheim Fellowship and studying orchestral writing. I had the opportunity to write the arrangements for this recording with Joe Locke and Lincoln Symphony Nebraska, the Lincoln Symphony Orchestra. And then, after that, I ended up going to New York to work on that record a little bit. I ended up doing some editing or mixing out in New York. And then he had an opportunity to play a gig at the Kitano Hotel, and his piano player that he was working with at the time wasn't available. And he's like, can you do this gig? And we did that gig with a quartet, a killer group with David Fink and Jameo Brown, and it went well. And the head of Motima was there, and she's like, I'd like to record this group. And then the opportunity came to record another a quartet record with him, and then put out that symphony orchestra record with him.
Yeah.
And then I had also brought him in to play on my record,
I remember
Another Look. And so
you had him at the Jazz Fest too, I think, one year. Didn't you bring Joe Locke in or something?
2015.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So we've been playing together and working together, and I love playing with him. He's an inspirational player. And so we were just working together on and off. And then I did a tour with him in 2015, and he was talking about Thomas Marriott, that he was working on this ballads record with him, and that he wanted to do something that had some, strings and some other like creative like synth or sampler programming to create this more expansive palette of sound for Thomas to play on, and that it wasn't going to be a blowing record. He wanted it to be like a record of operatic arias where there's the soloist like really just delivering beautiful melodies, and that's the integrity, like to try to connect with people at that level. And you need someone to do the arrangements, or what he was thinking. And I was like, I just at the time I had been working on some film type writing, and I had just done this fellowship with Sundance. And I was talking with him that I'm working at these sounds, and I'm really into this. And so then he's like, maybe this will work out. Fast forward, ended up doing this record that's coming out today. That's out now.
It's out now.
Yeah.
We're recording in January.
And
January,
and it's called Romance Language. Thomas Marriott's a wonderful trumpet player based in Seattle, and we tracked it in Seattle, and then I wrote orchestral arrangements that I wrote, like they can be played with a live symphony orchestra, but I ended up doing a lot of sampler programming, very detailed type of programming.
So it sounds like strings.
It sounds like with live strings, and it sounds like with other orchestral and sampler type textures. It's supposed to just bring you in and just create this big sound.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it was a lot of work. So I ended up producing that with Joe, and it was a joy to work on. And
you went to the Sundance, the film festival, but it's the Sundance. What did you get? You got a fellowship?
That was I was a Sundance film composer fellow in 2014.
Wow.
And I have been doing a little bit of work in that arena, and I want to do more. And it was an amazing experience learning from some of the best film composers that are writing today, and best engineers and sound designers in the world.
How long of a because we were talking off camera a little bit, so you were actually at Lucas's place, right?
Yeah, Skywalker Ranch
Skywalker Ranch.
for 2 weeks. We were there.
Wow.
It was day and night. You know, like
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that to me, right, is like your next step is to get into the film composing thing, because I mean, you're writing for the jazz stuff, your new recording that's coming out in the spring. You're creating all of these different things, but I mean, isn't the next step like to really push yourself outside of what you're already pushing yourself, is to see if you can actually do that on the next level, right? I mean,
I would love to do that type of work. It's I have great admiration for great film composers, and it's from a composer's perspective too. It's really, again, like thinking of like the challenges as a composer. It intrigues me because it's a different way of writing music. That just that experience of working in film music has informed my latest project, Originations, because it's about when you're working with a film, it's about the storytelling of whatever the film is. It's not just about the composition as itself.
Right.
You have to be thinking about storytelling and how does the music push the story forward. And that experience really pushed me on this project that's coming out later this year, Originations, because I was really wanting to tell a story as a whole with this project, and not just thinking about the little, the micro is being informed by the macro.
right.
And so I have great admiration for film composers, and I hope to be doing a lot more of that too.
And to
down the
me,
road.
that's like another level of problem solving, puzzle solving,
Yeah, it is.
right? Because somebody's telling you, okay, here's what it is. You have to put music to
Yeah.
this. So here's the problem.
Yeah.
Here's what you have to do, and here's the emotions you have to do. I mean, it's another level of puzzle
Yeah.
piecing together,
And-
which is what you love.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not like. Sometimes a director might not know either what it is. You're trying to figure it out together.
Oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
they will. Sometimes
Right.
they will. But sometimes, you've got to figure it out, and it's just a different level of challenge where it's not just about stylistically this or that.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what type of sound is going to show this level of joy or loss or complex emotion. Like, how do you create that sound?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. And these master film composers, I had a chance to sit next to some of them and look at a scene with them. And it was really amazing. It's a different it's like a different way of looking at, like they would immediately look at a scene, and like you talk about, like we talked earlier, like about the idea of walking outside in nature and how music can,
Yeah.
like we were looking at a scene, and these film composers are immediately locking into what they're seeing and what they're hearing in a different way than just a concert composer or someone who's writing jazz, music for albums or recording.
Yeah.
They are really emotionally in tune to their environment in a way that I found incredibly inspiring to my musicianship, whether it's writing a film or writing for anything else.
Right.
Because, like we were talking about earlier, you can study the history of composition, but ultimately you want to be writing about life. You want to be writing about being a human being. You want to be expressing something that is drawing upon that history, but is not just writing something because of its historical precedent.
Right. Well, you still have to put your own emotion into it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure every one of the master film composers that you were sitting next to had a different take on each thing that they were watching. So it's interesting how the whole thing can be
It's
put
fascinating.
together.
And there was also at that program there were 5 other composer fellows. And what we would do is every couple of days we would have to write music for a film that was brought in, like for like a 4 or 5 minute scene. And then they would screen it. And then you'd see 5 different versions of it. And it was amazing
Wow.
to see like different. We all had the same thing to look at it, but you'd see different perspectives, in each one, and they all worked.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. And I think the success of in that context or any other is like how poignant are they? Like how deep are how much can you get into the besides the sounds and the technique of what you're doing? What degree of separation do you have as an artist, as a player or a composer, to the feeling or the mood? Do you have all the barriers out of the way so that whatever you're doing is super poignant? So you see that and you hear that, and when you see these composers that are tapped in at that level, that they get right, they cut right to the quick, like right to the feeling, without they're more in tune to that. It's really pretty awe-inspiring.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, I appreciate you coming in. This has been dynamite.
Oh,
I'll
my
tell you.
pleasure. Thank you so much, Mike,
No,
for having
absolutely. And of course, people can get more information at
me. RyanCohan.com.
RyanCohan.com.
COHAN.
Well, we'll link it up below. And so, thanks so much for watching. This is our feature interview here for the December. Geez, I'm thinking of what month I'm in. For January 2019. Of course, you can watch all of the different interviews and see our entire issue for January 2019 at chicagojazzmagazine.com. And of course, this is available on every podcast platform, and the video is available on every social media platform. And Ryan, thanks again for coming in.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And we'll see you again next month at chicagojazzmagazine.com.